Welcome to the Elevating Funeral Service podcast. If you want to run a successful funeral home, cemetery, or pet cremation service, you don't have to be the one that has the lowest price. You do need to be the one that offers the most value, provides the best customer experience, and clearly communicates that in your marketing. On this weekly podcast, Ellery and Welton will show easy ways to demonstrate value to families and create differentiation that helps you stand out from the competition. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Elevating Funeral Service Podcast. I'm your host, Ellery Bowker. I'm with my good friend and co-host, Welton Hong. This is the podcast where we teach funeral homes and cemeteries how to add more value for their families and clearly communicate that in their marketing. Welton, how are you doing today?
Having fun, just enjoying the 110 degrees out here in Vegas.
Still hot in Vegas?
Yeah, super hot.
Yeah, you could say that in January, I bet, out there. Yeah. Well, listen, we've been having some fun doing this podcast. I've been getting a lot of good feedback on it. Have you?
Yes. Yeah, having a lot of fun as usual. Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I'm really happy about is that people are finding value in it. Our audience is growing every week, which is good.
Right.
We're getting some people to reach out that want to, offer their, expertise on the podcast, which I think is good as well. But, we did that episode on the GPL a couple of weeks ago, and we had quite a few people respond to that. So, we're helping some people find value and we're giving some tactical information. So I'm really glad about that.
Yep.
Today we got a good episode. We're going to be talking about family follow-up surveys. We're going to be talking about really just best practices. If you're going to be sending out surveys, what are the best ways to do it so that you can maximize the results and just kind of streamline that process? So, Welton, let's just dive right into it.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on surveys in general, like family follow-up surveys?
Yeah, it's in general, I would love to get feedback about the service itself.
Mm-hmm.
Did the service went well? Are we happy with the service? What else can we actually improve upon the whole experience?
Mm-hmm.
So if for me, it's mainly for just to get feedback on the service itself.
Right. As the funeral home owner, you want to get feedback on it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a sense of how many of your customers are using surveys?
I will say still not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a small fraction of them do use any type of surveys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I obviously think they're important, and full disclosure, our company, we've got quite a bit of experience in surveys. So what we're going to talk about today, a lot of this is coming from our own experience with surveys.
Great. Yeah, you got a lot of data.
Yeah, we do. We've got a ton of data, and we're friends with a lot of people in the business that do surveys.
Yeah.
There are a lot of really good companies in the funeral business that provide surveys. There's Johnson Consulting.
Right.
If you remember, a Selected Independent,
Mm-hmm.
they do a good job with surveys.
Yeah.
Some management
NFTA.
groups do, NFTA.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them. And my contention is more like just do it. I don't care who does it, but just survey your families. To me, it is one of the biggest missed opportunities out there if you're not surveying your families.
Right.
Just kind of in general, let's hit on a couple of points about why we think they're important. For me, I think it just allows you to measure the entire customer experience, right?
Oh, yeah.
So customer satisfaction, but end to end. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, start to finish, right? Which part of the journey felt short? Is it the last part? Is it the middle part? Were they expecting a little more follow-ups, a little more engagement? And I think it's overall, it'll make the whole user experience, the whole experience, customer experience much better.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I talked about this offline. So it allows you to gauge the customer experience, to analyze that and hopefully glean some insights from that. But I think also too, as staff, whether it's the funeral director, the counselor, the front desk person, whatever, the person answering the phone, it holds us accountable. And years ago, I was working with an organization that they weren't very sales driven, but they wanted to make sure that every family was offered the same opportunity. Mm-hmm. So one of the things they did in their survey, which I thought was interesting, was they asked questions that held everybody accountable in the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the one thing they were particularly paying attention to, and again, this is going to sound profit driven. It's not, it was just about process driven.
Mm-hmm.
But what they were trying to do is to make sure that family was offered all of the options in the arrangement room. And so, for this kind of point, I'll call it like arranger accountability. But for example, what they would do is they would ask on the survey, were you offered an opportunity to look at cremation jewelry, or were you know what I mean? So just different questions, because what they were finding, and we all know this, is that funeral directors are caregivers and they're ministers and they're not salespeople by and large. And a lot of times if a funeral director is in the arrangement room, when it comes time to try to sell something, right, beads of sweat start forming on their forehead.
I do that too.
Yeah, they get very nervous and then they just don't do it. So this one particular organization used that survey as a way to make sure that every family was being offered the same options, kind of across that board.
That's smart.
And that could be accountability to make sure, that you were doing it, but then also accountability to reward those that are doing it. So there's a couple different ways you can look at that. Yeah. Insights. That's what we get from surveys. When we survey our own customers, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for insights. I'm looking for ways that we can improve our product. We can improve our service. Do you guys do anything? Do you guys survey any of your own customers?
I do. Here and there, I will send out an email. We just use the basic NPS score. And it's try to get a survey. Hey, are they detractors? Are they passives? Are they promoters? Right. So we do survey our own existing clients just to see how happy are they with the service. And it's still simple. One question. It doesn't give you the whole complete picture. Right. But it's better than nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
For the listeners, to unpack that a little bit, what he's talking about is the Net Promoter Score survey. And basically kind of visualize this. It's a score of 1 to 10. It's one question, and it says, how likely are you to recommend our service or our product to friends and family, right? That's kind of the gist of it. Right. And the way they measure this is if it's 9 or 10, those are your promoters. Is that right?
Yep.
6, 7, and 8 are kind of the neutral zone.
Yep.
Yep, the passives. And then anything from 6 down are your detractors.
Right.
So basically it's just a pulse check is all it is, right? Like, was this, are these people, are they going to help grow your company, or are they going to help, drag you through the mud on the other end? So do you guys do any kind of follow-up with that at all? Or
we do. Yeah. Especially, so the promoters, obviously we know they're happy. It's more of the detractors. I jump in right away. Once that comes back, I get involved right away. I want to make sure at least most of our clients are nice and tense, right? 7 to 8 just means they're passive. We'll work hard to make sure we can get them to nice and tense. But anything under 6, me personally, I get involved right away.
Yeah, that's awesome. Why do you think that Net Promoter Score is so popular? Because it is, right? Lots of big, hospitality brands use it. Why? Just because it's one question, it's easier to get respondents?
I think it's just easy to catch like growth levels, whether they're happy or not. Then at least if you're not happy, then you start to triage what happened to this client, right? So I think it's just simple.
Yeah. Interesting. I also thought too, one of the reasons why I would think surveys are important is that it gives you a chance to increase the customer retention.
That's right.
So I think about my father-in-law, for example. Great guy, but very non-confrontational, and if he left your business and he wasn't happy, unless you really, really made him mad, he's probably not going to say anything to you.
Yeah, me too.
But if you asked him, he would share that with you. So I think about if you have a family, and one of the, I think the biggest threats to funeral homes all over is letting an indifferent family walk out that door, and you really don't know whether they were happy or whether they were sad, right? You should know when they're leaving there, because you don't want somebody to walk out that door and not be happy and you not know about it.
Right.
So if you send a survey to a family and they respond, and say they weren't happy, it gives you a chance to kind of jump in there, like you said, see if you can figure out what happened, triage, make it right, and then kind of maybe retain that customer.
Right. I guess it definitely is. You have to reach out to them. I keep on going back to here and there. My wife and I would love to splurge at high-end restaurant. And then they always come by, hey, is the steaks cooked good enough? And we're typically, even if it's not cooked to what we like, we still say, hey, it's good. Right? We just don't want to hurt their feelings.
But you're not helping them.
No, right. But I'm one of those that just kind of nice. But if they send me a paper survey or some email survey, then I might, tell them that. Yeah, but if they just ask me straight, I will still say, oh, it's perfect.
That's interesting. Yeah, some people are like that. I've always believed that, I've just always been a really direct person, so, and I'm sure sometimes when I'm giving feedback, I can come across as a jerk. But I also think too, that people appreciate kind of knowing where you stand, and so, but I know my wife is like you. She would not want to say that because one, she's from the South, and every good Southern woman will sweep everything under the rug, right? They don't want to deal with anything. But also she would be afraid you'd take that stake in the back and do something to it. Yeah. So obviously, needless to say, surveys are important.
Oh, yeah.
I would say the vast majority of funeral homes and cemeteries are not surveying their customers now. So this episode hopefully can maybe encourage you, if you will, to think about doing surveys. I know it's another thing on your plate, but there are companies that can do it for you. There are really easy ways you can do it yourself. But I think the main thing is just to get started doing it, and even if you want to start doing it yourself and let some company do it for you later, but every family that walks out of there that you don't talk to after that, you're missing an opportunity to gauge how you did, to get insights, to learn how to do the product better, et cetera. So I thought we might do Welton is just kind of take the next part of this podcast, this episode, and just talk about best practices. And we could call this either tips to know or mistakes to avoid.
Sure.
But, I thought we could identify a few things that we could share with the audience about, how you might want to think about doing surveys. I'll start. I think the first one is that you should have a goal. Right? What do you want from the survey? Do you want just good, warm and fuzzy feelings? Do you want, quantitative data? What is it that you want? So in your case, when you're talking about your NPS score, you really just want to do a pulse check. Are they happy or are they not happy?
Right.
And then you're willing to dive in there if they're not happy and try to get in there and figure out what that is.
Right.
Yeah. Is there any other goal other than just pure satisfaction with you guys for the survey?
We personally are more worried about retention than anything else. So that is typically the key metric I look at, is how happy they are with the service, with the results, right? And I should have broken apart, hey, how happy are with the results? Because they might like the digital marketing strategies a lot, but the results are not there, right? Or vice versa. So I should have surveyed it differently if I really do it properly.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because we survey our customers quite a bit, and they may have mixed feelings about the product, right? But have great feelings about the staff, or like we're known for our customer service. We will call people back, and we call them back so fast they get startled, all times of day and night. They're like, I can't believe how responsive you guys are to our needs, and that's just we have to be, right? We owe it to them. But yeah, so some feedback may be, up or down on the product, but then, so like in our surveys, for example, like I know we've got the customer service and dialed in, like we never get bad. I mean, the people rave about it. But then there may be some work we have to do on our product or on our processes or on our billing or, other areas.
Great feedback for you, or else you wouldn't know how to
absolutely
improve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about like, we think about surveys the way you think about it, right? Customer retention.
Right.
We don't have one-time customers, right? A funeral home's going to have a customer every 7 years or every other, family members and that sort of thing. So, you obviously can expand on that one customer, but for us, it's about customer retention, right? We partner with these funeral homes. And so we want to make sure that we're delivering value. And the way I like to think about it, and we don't survey them, every month, but I like to think about if they're paying us every month, I like to think that we are literally interviewing for the next month.
Right.
So we're on a job interview every month to get hired for the next month and then the next month and the next month. And so when we survey, just every so often, it helps make us aware of kind of how we're doing, in that interview, because it's super important. Like you, I think people should have a plan for the feedback.
Definitely.
I think that it would probably surprise a lot of people how many funeral homes that are surveying families get surveys back and don't do anything with them.
Oh, wow.
Right? They read them. Right. I mean, it's not that they're not doing anything with them, but there's no action plan.
No.
So for example, are you tying the survey results to compensation? Right. Are you benchmarking anything? Are you analyzing that data in any way? And it doesn't necessarily need to be quantitative data that you're graphing, but if you get feedback, even in not a quantitative, data driven survey, but just more of like a questionnaire. Are you doing anything with that? Are you meeting with your staff? Are you discussing these results?
Right.
Are you saying, hey, based upon what we're reading right here now, what can we do better?
Yeah.
Right. And focus on the wins, but then also focus on the opportunities.
Right. Even it's a positive feedback that we got from the family, probably need to pat the back on the funeral director, whoever served. That's a good positive feedback.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
Well deserved. Well deserved. So another tip that I had, or a mistake I think you should avoid, is asking questions that don't align with your goal. So in other words, ask the right questions. Now I will say there's a caveat here, because some surveys from some organizations, you can't alter the questions because what they're trying to do is they're trying to benchmark across a large group of people. So you don't have that flexibility.
Right.
But if you do have that flexibility, ask the questions that are important to you. And I'll give you some examples. And again, we've got quite a bit of experience with surveys, and so we can tell a lot of what people are asking and why they're asking it and that sort of thing. But we have a funeral home, for example, and this is just kind of a funny story, but he has 10 questions, I think, on his survey, and about 8 of them are about landscaping. He has a beautiful funeral home with beautiful, greenery, but for some reason, like, that's really important to him, how families think about like his, area and like his landscaping and that. And it's almost comical to me, because that wouldn't be important to me, but it's important to him. So if his goal is to make sure that he has, the highest satisfaction of landscaping, that's what matters to him. But so let's talk about that. What questions do you think funeral homes or cemeteries ought to ask?
So definitely the overall experience, for sure. And surveying what could have been better. And also about where they explain all the products and services, for sure. Yeah.
You just said, what could be better? I wonder how many surveys people ask that pointed question, like, what could we have done better? Because again, you're giving people an opportunity to criticize you, which is tough to take sometimes, right? But it's also really, really helpful.
Right. So Ellery, with these, since you have a lot of experience, should it be multiple choices, just like 8, like satisfaction 1 through 5, or some of these would be open-ended to get?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it comes down to the goal. And let me break this down into probably 2 different things. So take a company that's more focused on direct cremation, right? Like it's a minimal service provider. And then let's talk about like a full service traditional funeral home. The questions that a direct cremation provider asks on the survey may be very different than a full service. Let me give you an example. If for example, I'm a direct cremation company, right? 99% of what I do is direct cremation. I'm getting all of my leads from Google, right? Or 99% of my leads from Google. What I might be focused on is customer acquisition,
right?
Because I'm spending money marketing. I'm probably very data driven. It's a low margin product. I want to know how you found out about us, right? So that would be huge for me. I would also want to know about price. Like, was the price? And a lot of times people say, was the price, above what you expected, below what you expected, or as expected? So I would want to know. So if I'm a direct cremation company, I'd want to focus on customer acquisition. Where can we attribute the sale to? Pricing is very important. Likely that I would have an online process if I'm a direct cremation company, and so I would want to find out about that use case, like how easy was it, how available was the information, how easy was it to use the system, where was the friction, or if you found any friction, that sort of thing there. And if you contrast that with a full service funeral home, they are largely service driven. Questions they ask maybe more about the services, right? Like, how was the facilities, how did the staff do, maybe questions about the personalization options, that sort of thing. So when you ask about multiple choice versus open-ended, what we see is a mix of both. I'll share with you that I think we have a really good return rate on them. And I think there's a few things that we can attribute that to. And one is the way the survey is designed has a lot to do with, who will fill it out and how many will fill it out.
Right.
And this is just a personal thing for me, but I've always believed that if I'm filling out that survey and it feels like I'm taking the SAT, then I don't feel like I'm giving you
No.
feedback. I feel like I'm just giving you data, and then it becomes a chore.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we all have to realize now is that as consumers, we have survey fatigue.
Yeah.
We get asked for surveys for everything.
Hotel, airline,
Everything.
restaurant.
I leave the dentist office. I don't even get to my car, and I get a text message asking me to rate my experience.
Yep.
But yeah, every restaurant, everything. My wife and I went to a nice restaurant a couple nights ago for our anniversary, and I had made the reservation with Open Table.
Right. Exactly.
And again, the next morning, before I'm even out of bed, I get a survey asking me to rate the experience.
Right.
So I think that we get survey fatigue. So I think it's really important that, you frame it in a way that, you really care. It's not just routine. You really want to know, well, how did we do? Like, it's important to me to know, to hear that feedback on how we served your family. So I think if it comes from a place of caring and intent to be really good at what we do, that's very different than just kind of an automatic survey that goes out, 2 seconds after you get serviced. So again, coming back to the questions, it depends upon what your goal is, because, and again, think about from a cemetery, for example, their questions might be about, the park, right? The grounds, the sales process, again, maybe customer acquisition even. What I saw one time on a survey, and I thought it was absolutely genius, was a cemetery that we served had a question that they put on there, and it said, at the end of it, it said, do you have the cremated remains of loved ones at home, right, that you'd like to have interred? And I thought that was a very good question, because one of the challenges cemeteries have right now, as we know, is educating consumers on the on the burial options for cremated remains. People feel like if the mantle at home or scattering are the only options, then so the cemetery does a really good job now of explaining that to people. And so if you serve a family now, and they buy a columbarium, for example, or they do something else with it, they very well may likely have cremated remains at home. So anyway, that cemetery put that on there, and they're having quite a bit of success with that.
So, very smart.
Yeah. The other thing I've seen too is a survey is a great way to generate pre-need leads.
That's a lot of third-party marketing company uses it for.
It's a great way to at least, some can ask very pointed questions, right? Like, would you like someone to contact you about pre-arranging your own services? Some ask, more vague questions, would these services have been easier had they been pre-planned? So you can approach it, or you can directly ask it. And again, it's totally up to you. Okay. Another tip, and this is probably the biggest one I have the whole episode, is keep it short. What do you think about the length of surveys?
If it's exactly when you talked about SAT test, it brought me back a while back. I'm old now, but I still remember sitting at that desk just taking the SAT test. And if it just become a chore, I wouldn't take it. I will not, no matter how good the incentive is.
Well, it would have to be huge for some of those. It's interesting too, because I'm not a huge fan of the Net Promoter Score that you're using, because I feel like I shouldn't say that. If you do what you're supposed to do, right? If you do the effective follow-up, the NPS can be a great tool. I shared this with you the other day. If you're not going to do anything with the data, or you're not going to dig deeper, what's the whole point? So for example, I was in Atlanta not too long ago, and I walked out of the bathroom, and it said, how was your visit today? And there was 3 buttons, literally. And it was like, great, average, or not so great.
Those digital.
They're digital.
Little screen.
And the first thing that came to my mind was, I don't want to touch anything in a bathroom. Like, I've seen people walk out of that bathroom without washing their hands. If they touched it, I don't want to follow them. So if I can't reach up and kick it, I'm probably not answering that question. But my point is that all they're going to do, let's say 1,000 people walk out of that bathroom, and 500 of them say average, 300 say negative, 200 say positive. All they have is a number, right? So if 300 people said it was bad, why is it bad? Just knowing it's bad, okay, great. Now you have data that shows that 30% of the people think this was a terrible experience. You don't know why, so what do you know to fix? So I'm not a huge fan of the Net Promoter Score, in particularly because, and again, this is just my opinion, I think with the NPS score, and I understand it quite well, I think you have to have a lot of people, right, to trend anything. Yeah. So I think if you take a look at a funeral home that does 100 calls a year, if all 8 families they serve a month respond, to me it's still not enough to really look at maybe what an NPS score would be like.
Agreed.
So that's just my thoughts on it. But again, I think it's absolutely better than nothing. For funeral homes, I think there's a unique opportunity to get a survey response that's more heartfelt because the event was more heartfelt. And so the more important the event is, the more likely you are to fill that survey out with more real, feedback on that. So I'll tell you that I think 10 questions is probably max. I don't think I would ask more than that. I've seen some funeral home surveys that were page upon page upon page upon page. And honestly, it was just incredible because a couple of things. One, a lot of the questions can be condensed into one. Like I've seen it where 3 or 4 questions basically ask the same thing. And then you're asking people to get so granular in the questions. It just doesn't feel good. And when the longer it is, you're really balancing quality versus quantity. So if you want, if you have a 17-page survey and somebody fills it out, you're going to get really good feedback, but you're not going to get very many of them.
No.
Yeah. The shorter you keep it, the more you're going to get back.
And keep it simple and short. Short and simple.
Yeah. And then the last thing I had would be to send it independently. We've talked with quite a few funeral directors that are doing surveys now, and we'll discuss with them what their response rate is. And it's typically very, very, very low. And when I investigate and I ask them how they're doing it, and I try to get some more information about it, because to me, in our experience, the responses are very high. And so for them to get a very low response, we're trying to just figure it out why that's happening. And the one thing that we found was pretty common was that when the service is over with, they will fold a survey up and put it inside with all of the other paperwork, right, that the family takes home. So they kind of have that folder with all of the other paperwork in there. And to me, it's kind of stuck in with everything else. A lot of people don't want to open that folder, right? There's, stuff in there that makes me sad. And they kind of keep it. So our experience has been that if you send it independently at the right time, that can definitely affect the response rate on that. So,
definitely.
Your thoughts on that?
I agree. Should be independently. Shouldn't be in that folder or combined with it. Should definitely be sent out totally separately.
Yeah. That's pretty much all I had on the survey.
I have
there's
weird
a lot
question for you.
Sure.
Yep. So when I talk to funeral directors, they are always slightly confused when they send these surveys out versus asking for reviews. How can they combine both, or is it totally independent of each other?
That is a great question. And I can give you some actual firsthand experience with that. With our system, and again, this is not about our company. This is just, I'm just telling you how this works. We have, if we send somebody a text message, right, with a link to fill out a survey, if they fill out a survey, at the end of that survey, we can then ask them, do they want to complete an online review, right? Now, we're not review gating it.
Nice transition.
Yep. So you answer the surveys. At the end of it, it's going to say thank you, and would you like to leave a review? We're not review gating it. So if they say, if they say bad things, we're still asking them if they want to leave a review. What we found is that you get less reviews that way, right? Because I think what's happening is in the mind of the consumer, they've already answered your questions, right? And a review is like asking them to answer the same questions. So what we found is that, they should be 2 different events, right? be two different, completely separate. They should not be tied together. For the maximum effectiveness, they should not be tied together.
Got it.
And so you and I
Agreed.
had a discussion on this a couple of weeks ago about reviews on when you should ask them, whether it be right away or whether it be,
Right.
a little bit down the road. We differ on opinions on that. But again, I think it should be separate.
Got it. Good.
So
So they're totally independent. They're not.
I think so. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I think so. And I also think too that, and you call me crazy, but we found the best surveys that come back are on paper.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
if you
I love
send
paper.
surveys out, like all of our paper surveys go out and they have an online option, right?
Oh, wow.
Very, very few people use the online option. They fill it out.
Interesting.
And I mean, it's unbelievable how many people fill this out. And I think I think it goes back to the event.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. And I shared this with your team the other day. I go to Wendy's and I buy $1 cheeseburger and I get my cheeseburger and the young lady hands me a receipt. It's about 1.5 feet long. She throws it on the counter. She circles a number on the back and says, that if I fill this, if I take this survey, I can get a free Frosty.
Yep. I remember those.
Yeah. I don't care if this was the best cheeseburger in the world or the worst. I'm not going to call that number. I don't care anything about that free Frosty. So the event didn't mean anything to me. So the survey doesn't mean anything to me. Right. I buy a $40,000 car. I might fill that survey out. Right. And so I think that you take a look at the funeral experience. And if my family has suffered a loss, and I go to your funeral home and, it's amazing how much a family will bond with a funeral director over 2 days. In 2 days, there's a relationship built. And so, you've shown me compassion, right? You've loved on me. You've helped my family immensely. And so when I get a survey from you and it's personalized and you're basically asking me to help you, that's the law of reciprocity, right? I mean, you helped me, I want to help you back. And we'll tell you all kinds of things, and I will say, so one thing I will say about the quality of, qualitative versus quantitative, in my opinion, I would ask more open-ended questions than closed-end questions. Now, again, if you're trying to survey 1 million people, you need data points, right? Or if you're surveying sales data across 100,000 families, you need data points. But if it's my funeral home, right, and I served 8 families last month, and I just want to know how we did, I'm going to ask a lot more open-ended questions. The one interesting thing I've seen about surveys is with the ones that at the bottom, right, or the very last thing, asks the people basically, is there anything in general that you'd like to share? And just a space to write. They write it all. They've written so much, well, and they got to turn the paper over and write on the side. Because people just want to share. I think if you give them an opportunity to share, they're going to.
Interesting.
Because it's such a heartfelt event, and people will just glowing praise on there. Yeah. So that's interesting. So, yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys for listening. We do appreciate it. Hopefully Welton and I have convinced you that if you're not doing surveys, that you should get started doing surveys. Again, it doesn't take much. You can type one up. It doesn't even have to be pretty, but get started. You can get better at it as you go. But again, if you served 100 families last month, there is a opportunity to get 100 people's feedback. Even if you don't get half or 30%, that's feedback that you can use, that you can get insights from, that you can create better customer experiences. We wouldn't be where we're at without surveys. Everything that our customers tell us is what helps drive us and our products. So if you guys found value in this episode, if you wouldn't mind going to iTunes or Spotify and leaving us a review, we would certainly appreciate that. We've got a couple of good episodes coming up over the next few weeks, so we think you guys are going to be excited about that. But as always, Welton and I appreciate you listening, and if there's anything we can do for you guys, just reach out. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Bye-bye.